3,000 years ago, the entire world ended, not one country, every empire, almost all at once. Cities that had stood for centuries burned in a single lifetime. Trade stopped, kings vanished, whole peoples disappeared. And here is the part that should unsettle you. We still do not really know why. To feel how big this was, look at the world just before it fell. This was the most advanced, connected world humans had ever built. Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenaean, Babylon, Assyria, great powers, trading gold and copper and ideas across the sea. Their kings wrote letters to each other, calling one another brother. They arranged royal marriages between kingdoms to keep the peace. It was, in its own way, a golden age of globalization. We know how connected they were because of a single sunken ship. Divers found a Bronze Age wreck off the coast of Turkey. On board, copper from Cyprus, tin from far to the east, gold from Egypt, ebony from Africa, amber from the distant north. One small ship carried goods from 3 continents. That was normal. That was Tuesday. It felt permanent, unbreakable, eternal. It was none of those things, because this entire world ran on one material, bronze. Bronze made the weapons, the armor, the tools, the wealth. But bronze is a recipe. Copper mixed with a little tin. Copper was common, but tin was desperately rare. Most of it came from mines thousands of miles away. So every kingdom depended on a supply line it did not control. Cut that thread, and the richest empire on earth becomes helpless. Nobody noticed how fragile that quietly made them. Then, around 1200 BC, the burning began, and it did not stop at one city. It spread. Mycenaean, the fortress of Greece's kings, burned. Pylos, whose scribes were writing right up to the end, gone. Hattusa, capital of the mighty Hittite Empire, torched and abandoned. Ugarit, a wealthy trading port, wiped off the map for good. Even Troy, the city of legend, fell in this same dark window. One after another, the lights of the ancient world went out, and out of the chaos came something from across the water. The Egyptians gave them a name, the Sea Peoples. Waves of warriors in ships burning coastlines as they landed. Behind them, whole families on the move, dragging carts and children. Who were they? Where did they come from? Even today, historians argue and admit they are not sure. They appear in the records, burn nearly everything, and then vanish. But one group of them we can actually name, the Philistines. They stopped raiding and settled on the coast of Canaan, and centuries later, their most famous son got a name you know, Goliath. The Bible's giant was likely a child of the Sea Peoples, but one city left us its final moment, frozen in clay. In Ugarit, a scribe was writing a desperate letter as it happened. The enemy ships are here. They have burned our towns. They have done terrible things in our country. The letter was never sent. The fire that destroyed the city baked the soft tablet hard. That is the only reason we can read his last words today. Only one great power saw them coming and held the line, Egypt, and its pharaoh, Ramesses III. In 1177 BC, he met the Sea Peoples in a massive battle. Egypt won, but only barely. Ramesses carved the whole victory across a temple wall to boast, but even the winner was never truly the same again. Egypt survived the blow, then slowly faded anyway. So that is the simple story. Mysterious raiders destroyed a world. Except that is almost certainly not what really happened. Because raiders do not make a whole civilization forget how to write. The Sea Peoples were not the cause. They were a symptom. The real killers were quieter and far more frightening. First, the rains failed. Scientists read it in ancient pollen and layers of seabed mud. A brutal drought that lasted, in places, over a century. Harvest after harvest failed, the granaries ran empty, and a world with no food becomes a world at war with itself. Kings begged their neighbors for grain in their final letters. It is a matter of life and death. One Hittite king wrote, "Starving people do not sit still, they move, they raid. So look again at the sea peoples, less an invading army, and more like millions of refugees fleeing a dying homeland." Then the ground itself turned against them. Geologists found a run of huge earthquakes in this exact era. An earthquake storm toppling city walls across the whole region. City after city, shaken into rubble. Now put every piece together, and you finally see the real horror. No single enemy did this. Everything failed at the same time. Drought caused famine. Famine caused migration and revolt. The migrations cut the trade routes. Cut routes meant no tin. No tin meant no bronze. No bronze meant no weapons. Each failure yanked the next one down with it. This is what we now call a systems collapse. The very thing that made them rich, connection, is what doomed them. They had built a house of cards the size of a world, and when it fell, the lights went out for centuries. Populations vanished. Proud cities became silent, empty ruins. And then the strangest loss of all, they forgot how to write. In Greece, the written word disappeared for 300 years. The stories survived only as myths, whispered around fires. Centuries later, those whispers became the tales of Homer. But collapse is never only an ending. With the tin roots gone, bronze was no longer king. So people turned to a metal they could dig up at home: iron. The disaster that ended the Bronze Age quietly began the Iron Age. And in the ashes, a small people invented something world-changing. A simple alphabet, easy enough for anyone to learn. A trading people called the Phoenicians carried it across the sea. They seeded those letters into every port they touched, the ancestor of the very letters you are reading right now. But here is the thought that should keep you up at night. They never saw it coming either. To them, their world felt modern, global, and permanent, the most advanced civilization on Earth. Until, suddenly, it was not. The more connected a world becomes, the harder it can fall. It has happened before, to people who felt as safe as we do now. A whole world can end, and later, barely be remembered at all. The Bronze Age